Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Laura Inclad, and I'm the co-president at the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching. As our moderator for our discussion today, I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of distinguished experts who are teachers, leaders, and researchers to discuss how new teacher mentoring can be more effective. In conjunction with our discussion, NIET is releasing today a paper entitled "Why New Teacher Mentoring Falls Short and How to Fix It." This paper shares our experiences with partners in Texas and Louisiana who are working to improve mentoring for new teachers. These improvements are being driven by changes in policy at the state and district level, including new state funding for teacher mentoring, compensation, high-quality training for the role, and increased time for collaboration, observation, and feedback. Today, we'll explore what new teachers need, how mentoring programs can address those needs, and how changes in state and district policy are improving the experiences of both mentors and the new teachers that they support. If there's ever been a year to provide new teachers with better support, this is the year. Many new teachers missed opportunities for student teaching entirely or participated virtually. At the same time, we know that students have greater academic and social and emotional needs this year as a result of disruptions from the pandemic. We need new teachers to be successful, and they need help to be able to do that. Mentorship is a common strategy used in many schools across our country, but it often doesn't go beyond the informal buddy system. The lack of effective support for new teachers is contributing to turnover, one of our biggest challenges in education. This turnover particularly impacts our schools that serve large numbers of students of low income students and students of color. As I mentioned, mentoring has been a commonly used strategy by states and districts across the country for many years, but the impact of those mentoring programs has been uneven at best. In our work at NIET, we found three primary ways that mentoring was falling short, and we explore these in our paper that was released today. First, there's a lack of focus and investment in instructional improvement. Specifically, the goals of mentoring are unclear and not tied to instructional improvement. There's often minimal release time or time for collaboration between mentors and mentees. As a result of this and inadequate compensation, it becomes difficult to recruit effective teachers to serve in the mentor role. Second, once selected, mentors often lack the training, tools, and resources they need to help them be effective in the role. For example, they're often not trained in coaching or how to use student work as a part of their feedback. Their support, as a result, often becomes one-off. It's not connected to a cycle of ongoing coaching for the new teacher. Third, another way that mentoring we found often falls short is that it's divorced from school and district systems, priorities, and initiatives. This can mean that mentoring is deprioritized or that the feedback that new teachers receive is disconnected from areas of emphasis. In addition, mentors are typically not included in the school leadership team. As a result, they're often not given the opportunity to provide school leaders with feedback around new teacher experiences and the needs of new teachers. But we know that high-quality mentor programs have been shown to increase teacher retention and effectiveness. For example, in a recent study by the Institute of Educational Sciences and Mathematica, in new teachers' third year of teaching, the students of teachers who had received 2 years of comprehensive support scored higher in both reading and math. Teachers themselves report that mentoring is the most helpful support that they receive. In a survey of National Teachers of the Year, quote, receiving access to a mentor was the top-rated support that former Teachers of the Year cited that impacted their effectiveness at the beginning of their careers. So given this potential of strong impacts for mentoring, NIET set out to study with several of our partners in Texas and Louisiana what works. In Texas, we studied and supported partners who were using the Texas Mentor Program allotment to strengthen mentoring programs. And in Louisiana, we've seen state increases in high quality mentor support and training. So what are some of the specific approaches we saw with these partners in Texas and Louisiana? We saw 3 main strategies that are our recommendations in our paper released today. First, an important strategy is focusing mentoring on instructional improvement. Districts in Texas and Louisiana are establishing a clear purpose for mentoring: improving teaching and learning. They are using state and district funds to invest time, training, and the use of an evidence-based instructional rubric to strengthen the work of mentors. In addition, districts are creating clear job descriptions, providing adequate compensation for mentors, and strengthening their processes to select effective teachers to serve in the mentor role. Second, mentors are being supported to be more effective by providing training, tools, and resources for their role. We know that a strong mentoring relationship must always begin by establishing a foundation of trust between the mentor and the mentee. But we have to go further. We must ground mentoring in student outcomes and the specific needs of the mentee to ensure that support is relevant. In order to do this, we have to train mentors to use a cycle of coaching for continuous improvement. This will then in turn create a pathway for growth for the new teacher that lasts over the course of the year. Our third strategy is focused on ensuring that district leadership helps to connect the mentoring program with the other priorities and goals of the district and school. We know that at its best, effective mentoring can help advance district priorities and goals. So districts must have a key role in supporting principals to integrate mentors into their school leadership structure. In turn, this helps school leaders to connect the work that mentors do with key school initiatives, things like implementing a new high-quality curriculum. So with that, I'm now pleased to welcome our distinguished panel to explore these issues in more depth and to discuss how mentoring can be more effective and provide the support that we know new teachers need. So first, I'm excited to welcome Sean Hayes, who is the Director of Teacher and Leader Development in Jefferson Parish Schools, the largest district in the state of Louisiana and among the 100 largest districts in the nation. Next, I'm excited to welcome Mari Hinojosa Barrera, a first grade teacher and mentor in the Alice Independent School District located in South Texas and home to just over 4,800 students. Dr. Thomas Smith is a special advisor to the chancellor and a professor at the Graduate School of Education at the University of California, Riverside. His research interests include education policy, teacher learning, and improvement science. Next, we have Kate Walsh. Kate is the president of the National Council on Teacher Quality, where she spearheaded efforts to instill greater transparency and higher standards among those institutions that exert influence over teachers, states, districts, and teacher preparation programs. And then finally, last but not least, we have Ruth Ye, who is the Teacher Mentorship and Leader Specialist at the Texas Education Agency, where she helps run the state's mentor program allotment. So welcome everyone. We're very excited to have you here today to discuss this important topic around how we can improve new teacher mentoring. So I want to start our discussion to focus on what are the supports that we know that new teachers need, and where are we seeing some challenges in providing high quality mentoring, particularly maybe some challenges that we're seeing in this year, a unique year in education. So Kate, I want to start off with you. So I know that you have studied preparation of new teachers at NCTQ for some time. I'd love to hear from you a little bit about what you're seeing nationally as some of the biggest gaps or needs that new teachers have when they enter their first classroom. Oh, I think we've got you on mute.
Sorry. I think it boils down to something pretty simple and basic, and that is the lack of high quality clinical experience that so many teachers arrive with their first job not having had. And that puts a tremendous burden on mentoring programs and makes them likely to be less effective because the mentor is in effect doing what the clinical experience should have accomplished. Student teaching is so poorly managed by both school districts and by programs. There's insufficient attention to the quality of both the cooperating teacher and the student teacher. And when you stop paying attention to quality, you lower your standards and you have lower expectations. So when you only make it a requirement that the cooperating teacher be a volunteer, a willing volunteer, or in fact, somebody the principal needs to have another adult assigned to because the teacher, him or herself, has a hard time managing classroom. When you start doing that kind of, when you lower your standards that much, you really pay the price in terms of the ability to deliver to a school a relatively well-prepared new teacher. You know, right now we know we've done analyses of what programs do vis-a-vis their student teaching programs, and 90% of them don't do anything but ask a school district or a school principal to supply a willing volunteer with maybe 3 years of experience, which is required by state law. Very few of them make sure that that cooperating teacher is both a great mentor and an effective teacher who contributes to student learning. Even though we know, much like the research that you're finding with mentoring, we know that when you place a student teacher with a really highly effective mentor teacher, that you get results that are unbelievable. You see essentially student teachers who arrive at a classroom with the equivalent experience of a third-year teacher. So all that translates both into lessons for both student teaching and for mentoring. They both ask that we train. The best way to prepare new teachers is to put them in the hands of seasoned teachers. So all the lessons we're learning from the relatively new research on student teaching definitely spill over into mentoring.
Absolutely. I think it relates to some of those challenges are leading to the things that we're trying to counteract with strong mentoring for new teachers, but it also points to some of those really important strategies around getting the right folks to serve in that mentor role. And I know we're going to keep talking more about that. But next, Dr. Smith, I want to pivot to you and talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the research and what does it show that some of the biggest challenges are in putting in place these high quality mentoring programs. If we know some of the characteristics we need to see, what are some of the barriers that are keeping mentoring programs from falling short?
Thank you, Laura. So as detailed in the NIET mentoring report, beginning teachers need a strong mentor, someone who they can go to when they're struggling, but who can also help them improve their instruction. One of the biggest challenges to providing high quality mentoring is time, both for the mentor and the mentee to meet together, but also to allow the mentor to regularly observe and provide feedback on the mentee's instruction. Another challenge is getting the right mentor-mentee fit, one that'll lead to openness, trust, the kinds of support that will help the new teacher succeed. In some of our work in large urban districts, instructional leaders found it challenging to identify mentors or coaches who not only effectively teach the standards themselves, but who also have the skills to help other adults do the same. In addition to sufficient time and a positive mentor-mentee match, an additional challenge is proximity or access. While large urban schools may be able to find effective mentors for beginning teachers in the same school teaching the same grade or subject, smaller schools, often in more rural areas, may struggle to find a good match within that particular context. One upside of the remote learning that most schools turned to in the last year is that both incoming beginning teachers and their mentors are much more familiar now with Zoom, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, or other video communication technologies. These technologies can allow for effective mentor-mentee matches across longer distances. For example, with mentees filming their own classroom instruction, then watching it along with their mentor, on the internet, even if separated by tens or hundreds of miles. Finally, beginning teachers also need a supportive administrator. Study after study shows that good leadership reduces the likelihood of teacher turnover. But this is about more than just the relationship between a beginning teacher and their principal or assistant principal. An effective principal sets the context for beginning teachers to succeed. They put the beginner on a strong and supportive team. They connect them with other teachers who they can go to for advice about lesson planning, effectively leading a discussion, or managing disciplinary issues. They expertly balance the need for teacher autonomy with the need for kids to learn, and they establish a climate where it's expected that all students can learn with the right forms of scaffolding. Teachers are free or expected to innovate, and everybody working at the school feels like they're making a positive contribution to student learning.
Absolutely. That concept of collective efficacy is one that we explore quite often in our work at NIET, how everyone works together. And I think you highlighting the role of the administrator and setting the tone for that, and in recruiting the right mentors to support teachers is key. One of the other things that you mentioned in your comments was this focus on how we can use the technology and some other things to help navigate challenges that we see in more rural settings. And so Ruth, I actually want to turn to you on this topic, because I know in Texas with the mentor program allotment, you all have been very strategic about dedicating and targeting some of those resources to schools that have not only high numbers of low-income students, but really are serving large numbers of rural students as well. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you all have strategically dedicated some of the MPA resources to those schools, and what are some challenges that you're seeing in continuing to make mentoring effective in some of our rural schools and districts?
Yeah, that's a great segue from Dr. Smith's answer in thinking about, so under House Bill 3, Texas has the mentor program allotment, as Laura mentioned, and districts are able to apply for funding to build and sustain mentoring programs. And just a large piece of what mentor program allotment or MPA's vision and understanding around the importance of mentoring is recognizing those different campuses and those that tend to need more of the mentoring support. We have known from research that mentees or new teachers are more likely to be placed at these types of campuses of low income, rural status, or less likely to be assigned to a mentor. And those are the different aspects that we definitely consider in part of the funding process and looking at, do the campuses serve like a maybe smaller student population? Are they serving rural students, low income? And something that we were actually excited to see from this past year of implementation was the end of year survey data, which did show a generally positive trend. But we also know, just in understanding on an overall overarching level around conversations we've had with these districts, that they're more likely to have just a limited network and capacity in order to sustain that change management and building, and in order to support the mentoring programs. So this is especially important as we consider right now, we just have a year-by-year process of the application, and now we're trying to move towards multi-year funding. So now trying to introduce this concept of long-term sustainability. How are these districts able to build the structures and have them in place that even after receiving funding, how are they kind of moving forward and continuing to support mentoring programs? So that's definitely some of those sort of risks that we're seeing in the future, is how are we going to problem solve in order to best support these types of districts, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that we don't just want informal mentoring programs, as we talked about earlier, but we really have to focus on how do we create the right systems and structures. And to your point, how do we do this year over year so that it isn't just the latest and greatest thing is instituting a mentoring program, but that it's an ongoing, well-established program that has the resources behind it to support over time. I think that's such a critical point that you're making. and a great benefit of the MPA program to be able to help put some of those structures in place. I think it's a great example of some actions that states can take to really put some guardrails and some high expectations and standards for what mentoring should look like. Sean, I want to go over to you next, and I know that you're really thinking about this at the district level. So I'd love to hear some ways that you all in Jefferson Parish have thought about how you can really prioritize the mentor role to make it more attractive, to get those highly effective teachers to be willing to sign up and sign on to work as a mentor and support a new teacher.
Thank you, Laura. Well, number one, I'll say it's not easy. I will tell you that. But there are a couple of recipes to success that we've had. I've been in Jefferson Parish now. This is my 4th school year, and I want to piggyback on a little bit of what my colleagues have mentioned already. Number one, a lot of the trajectory that we're on now started from exactly some of the same points that I think that Kate said first was around how are people being prepared, how are they coming out of preparation programs and out of university or alt prep. And that was a red flag for us. We saw that 4 years ago, that things were not where they needed to be. Ironically, I came into a district that had no mentoring programs that were set up formally at that time. And so then Superintendent Dr. Kate Brumley, who's now the state superintendent of Louisiana, tasked me with starting a formalized mentor program. It was one of the first things we did. I did that in literally the first 20 days that I worked in the district. And so we started that year, just for a little bit of context here, we started that year with about 60 or so mentors serving about 50 of our schools. Today, we now have about 200 mentors serving all 80 of our schools. And that's just one of our teacher leader roles. We've gone from one formalized teacher leader program, specifically tasked to mentoring, to 5. That now spans about 500 teacher leaders across the district. And so I think some of our attendees would agree that that is a direct reflection of your priorities and your values. And so I would say the same to the funding aspect, which was talked about earlier. Our state legislature has obviously put their money where their mouth is, for lack of a better way to put it. And so has provided some semblance of resources, but as I think it was Ruth who was saying, you know, eventually that pot's going to dry up. They're going to want the district to take it over. So how do we do that? Well, we started that well before Louisiana's new law came in place that requires a mentor for all undergraduate residents and postbacks. I will also add that our mentors do mentor veteran teachers as well. And so it's an interesting paradigm. But, you know, we've built on that foundation. We've expanded those pathways and increased that investment. I've been told time and time again from many of my mentor teachers that that alone is a huge push, seeing that something is actually going to stick in our district for a very long time and seeing that involvement. Number 2, change is inevitable, and I don't allow things to get comfortable. I allow things to get comfortable to an extent, but to grow and to evolve. And so a lot of my teacher leaders, I think I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say they enjoy the idea that they're always going to evolve every year. And so we're into we have a very structured, formalized program, which I will talk about at some point on this call. But also we have these off years where they get to apply and enact to do more of that role, and they'll come back with brand new learning. We've also done a great job of connecting the different programs, so they are separate, but they are connected in some way into that learning, which is building towards the structural piece, which I'll talk about. But also I'll go down to the nitty gritty. We do pay all of our teacher leaders a stipend. That stipend ranges from $1,500 to a TAT best practice mentor, all the way up to $7,500 for a master teacher. And so all of these roles are working in tandem. These teachers are active members of their ILTs. Some of these are even leading clusters. We've built that level of efficacy, that level of ability. And I'm also talking about not just leading clusters in something you're comfortable with. So we believe a lot in cross-training and building true mentoring capacity in our district. And they've seen the way that the district has elevated the role. These people are, for lack of a better term, put on a pedestal. They're out there, their media's out there, their story is told. We do fun promotions with them. I like to think we treat them like gold. We can always do better, of course. I'm always trying to do better. But I think then the number one thing that really needs to be discussed here is the relationship between the district to the school to the mentee, which has been talked about a little bit. I find oftentimes that, the district, or 501 as we're called, because it's the address, there can be a bad moniker. And so I want for my mentors to feel like they have access to the district just as within the realm of the typical line and chain. You're not doing things that are completely out there, but feeling like they have a comfortable relationship with central office and their school administrations, to feel like they're being supported not only from the district level, but then also at the school level. And so it's a lot of work and teamwork in a district our size to kind of make that fit. But I really feel like we're starting to see that trajectory, and the proof is in the pudding. While I don't have the best quantitative data because of everything that's happened, hurricanes, pandemics, things like that, at this point, what we can see is the qualitative data. What I can tell you is not only with that growth in the amount of mentors we've been able to attract, the top 3 things that attract them back are as follows. Number 1, the ability to work and impact a mentee, specifically the new teachers. That's always the number 1 that they put in. 2, it's driven and focused, and it's very much instructionally focused. There isn't a lot of excess fluff, as I would like to say. That's where we really put our bread and butter. And it's all based in student work, student-centered coaching, and really building trust and rapport relationships first. And so we've had a lot of success with that. And we've also, our last point, our retention rate in these programs is approximately 98%. And that 2% are moving up into other roles such as content leaders, master teachers, official TAP mentors, so moving from our less struggling schools to our more struggling schools, or even into AP and principal roles. So we've built that culture, and until that culture is solid, an effective mentoring program cannot thrive within all the various competing priorities within a district.
That's fantastic. I love your points around just the entire ecosystem that has to be there to support a mentoring program, and that retention rate is phenomenal. So congratulations on that great work and being able to recruit back your mentors year over year. I know that is a part of a very intentional strategy that you all have undertaken in Jefferson Parish through some of the points that you made. I want to turn to Mari next. So Mari, you are a very important voice in this panel discussion. You are our mentor representative for our panel today. And so one of the things that I know we talked about earlier on, and that is mentioned in some of your comments in the paper, is this idea of the importance of building trust in a relationship. We talked about how it can't just stop with building trust. We really have to get to that focus, as Sean just talked about, around instructional improvement. So I'd love to hear you reflect a little bit about, where you see the importance of focusing on instructional improvement, and maybe give us an example of what this looks like as you're working with the new teachers that you support and that you mentor.
Thank you so much, Laura. Like you mentioned earlier, trust has to be the foundation of this work. Then you pivot into the instructional focus of their job. You've got to make the connection with the person, really understand who they are and get to know them, and make them see that you're going through the same struggles they are. New teachers need to know that I am invested in their success as they are. So right from the beginning, we focus on our purpose, which is student learning. For example, I work with my mentee on lesson plan based with the district curriculum. We're sitting down, dissecting a standard, and looking at the complexity and the specificity of it to see what we can do better. If kids are getting it, if kids aren't getting it, we'll come back, adjust, and do what we need to do to hit that standard. If kids are getting it, we know we can move on to the next thing. When new teachers see the impact with their student, it changes them as a teacher, and they understand how better classroom teaching supports students to succeed. So we monitor and adjust, we write, we erase, we collaborate and collaborate again, because at the end of the day, it's about our students and how we're going to impact their future, but at the same time, build us in the same capacity.
That's fantastic. I love, some of the elements that you mentioned really bring to light that collaboration, and it's just evident the time that you're able to spend with the teachers that you're supporting. And I think as we explore in the paper, that's one of our key strategies, is that time has to be intentionally carved out from what we know are really busy schedules in the inner workings of schools on a daily basis. So that time element I know is really critical at getting to that instructional focus that you mentioned. The next topic I want to explore with this group is thinking about where we see some of the greatest opportunities to improve mentoring. So as we talked earlier, we know that we know that mentoring can be really successful, but we know that the results to date, at least as we look broadly, have been uneven at best. We see varying levels of quality. So I would love for this group to talk a little bit about where we see some opportunities to improve mentoring. So Ruth, I want to go back to you in Texas a little bit. So you guys are thinking about this very much from a state policy perspective. How have you really been able to help drive an instructional focus like we've talked about on mentoring? What are some of the things that you all have thought about in the design of the MPA program that really help to get to that instructional focus with mentoring?
I definitely love this question. And this is something that was mentioned earlier. It's just trying to move away from this idea of mentoring just being a buddy system. And that's kind of part of that change management that I was speaking towards, is like this mindset shift for some districts around instructionally focused mentoring. And part of what state policy kind of captures and a little bit of what we're trying to drive towards, right? On a basic level, mentor teachers are required to have 3 years of teaching experience and a proven track record to ensure that they have that experience to back up their mentoring. And we know that mentors can be great teachers, but then there's that separate skill of being able to prepare others to be great teachers. So we do also have this concept around mentor training, whether that be through an external partner or a district created mentor training. There are required training topics, no matter what training program they implement, that are surrounding effective mentoring partnerships, coaching cycles, data-driven instruction, lesson planning, learning environment, again, through this idea of this separate skill of being able to support their new teachers. Another piece is around thinking of the requirement for mentor and mentees to be able to meet for those number of hours per semester, so that way they can have those conversations. And part of it could be just observations of each other, coaching conversations. Those are all pieces that are very important for thinking of instructionally focused mentoring. And then even just on the basic level, when thinking about, this has been previously mentioned, the concept of mentor and mentee assignment. So being able to intentionally pair them. We do have within state policy, to the extent practicable, being able to match them with someone who's in the same school, same campus, same subject, same grade level, just because on that general sense of being able to provide that specific support in that way. And this is only our second year of implementation this year, so we're definitely learning a lot. But in terms of addressing your other part of the question around a shift, we definitely are seeing a little bit more of trying to shift away from this idea of just number of seat hours for training and thinking of it as like a competency building, right? And districts are definitely very ready and very eager and up for the task. So that's something that we're seeing at that district level. In terms of the last part around obstacles, and this is definitely something we saw within this past year, right? It was, of course, COVID being a challenge in general, but then also in thinking about going back to that concept of mentor and mentees being able to meet, we definitely saw a lot of districts struggle with lack of substitute coverage and high teacher turnover rate. So that's definitely something that's still on the horizon for us as like a challenge that we're trying to problem solve with districts. And then something I think that's somewhat worth calling out as like an additional obstacle is just around districts having multiple priorities and multiple goals, being able to kind of juggle all of those different areas while also focusing on high quality, instructionally focused mentoring programs. So those are some of those high level obstacles that we're starting to foresee.
Excellent. I appreciate you elaborating on those. Know that time element keeps coming up over and over again. And I think your last point there will delve into more too on how do you create that coherence at the district level to really put mentoring as a key strategy amongst in alignment with many other strategies that a district might be pursuing to get to increase student achievement. So on that time front, I know that you mentioned, it's not just the credentials, and Kate mentioned this earlier too. It's not just the credentials of having served in a teaching position for 3 years that matter. It's really getting teachers the right training. And I loved your point about competency-based training. I think that's really important. It's not just the seat time. We've all been in trainings where you're just sitting there. We really want to see what are folks getting out on the other side of that training. So what competencies or skills do mentors need to build to be able to work with adults? And then how do we give them the right resources? That's one of the key strategies that we outline in the paper. And so, Tom, I want to come back over to you. I'm curious about some of the changes that you're seeing in mentoring programs that maybe help to address some of the challenges that we've talked about, or that you're seeing are leading to some of our stronger results and better teacher retention levels.
Sure, thank you. One of the things that I think is really critical is to see better matches on the content area or grade. Someone who teaches like you want all of your teachers to be teaching. And this has been a struggle with a lot of mentoring programs for a long time, particularly district level programs that might recruit, maybe 10, mentors from across the district to then support all of the teachers at all grade levels in that context. And what those programs do effectively is provide the emotional support that new teachers need to survive, but they don't often provide the kind of instructional support that they need to improve students' learning, both in their year of, or years, hopefully, of mentorship, but to kind of get into a routine, where learning is part of what being a teacher is all about. Also, I think I'd like to, support the notion that the training of mentors, is really critical, not just in kind of the grand ideas and the goals, but on some specific tools and activities that they should be doing with their mentees. I think the coaching cycle is one of a number of tools that is a really useful way to organize kind of a relationship of improvement between a mentor and a mentee. It allows kind of for identification of areas where somebody would want to or needs to improve, and then really kind of thinking through and trying out a range of new methods or new ways to engage with students, that could lead to that area. I also think that focusing on the standards, is a critical aspect of instruction. Particularly with Common Core or even kind of the standards that came before, not all teachers everywhere completely bought in to the goals that were really underlying those standards. And so having teachers that serving as mentors that really buy in, see the value, and hopefully with training develop the skills to be able to work with another adult in order to help move them towards effective teachers of the standards is really critical. And then I'm also very supportive of a rigorous selection process, one that builds up the role enough so that people want to stay in it, more than just 1 year. And while I think a stipend is important to show the value of a mentor being in that role. What I really like about kind of the frameworks that are being done, in both Texas and Louisiana is this idea of kind of centering the role of the mentor or teacher leaders in general as part of the broader school leadership, making it, part of, kind of a teacher growth agenda to where, once you demonstrate that you are a highly effective teacher in the classroom, there are opportunities for you to grow in your role as a teacher. And, certainly mentoring is a critical one of those.
Yeah, that's definitely a theme I'm picking up across many of the comments today, is that, there's a prestige to serving as a mentor teacher that we, need to, commonly attribute to that role. What more important task or charge could you be given than supporting a new teacher who's coming in and is going to be working with, 30 to 150 students, depending upon their grade level throughout the year. That's a really impressive task and a really difficult one. And we have to put the resources and the support and honor the immense responsibility that role has. And I think it's the same, Kate, probably with cooperating teachers as well on the teacher preparation side. It's a really important role too. And I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that.
Yeah, I mean, it takes, there's so many parallels between what it takes to run a good student teaching program and what it takes to run a good mentoring program. But I would only argue that districts that think they can do this only by honoring and not by and not by compensating are probably not making the wisest choice. It's a very, very low cost way to hold on and to attract and hold on to high quality mentors. Why would anyone who's a really great teacher just out of their goodness of their hearts choose to year in and year out mentor a new teacher when they've got a million other things they've got to get done every day? I mean, it's just basic. It's acknowledging that teaching's hard work, and that asking people to make more time in their day to help a new teacher work just requires, by virtue of the ask, some additional compensation.
Absolutely. I think it also is important as districts provide not only the recognition, but the compensation. That also allows them to create some real expectations around the role as well. When you're compensating someone for something, it allows you to create the structure and the expectations for that role. And then obviously putting the training towards that, as we've spoken about today, is a really critical element of that as well, and just equips mentor teachers to be able to do their job effectively. And so, Mari, I want to ask you a little bit about the training side of things. So you are an active mentor right now, and you've gone through some of the training associated with the mentor program allotment in Texas. And so would love to hear you reflect a little bit about how that training has helped you really transition from the classroom teacher perspective to really thinking about your role as a coach for these new teachers.
Thank you, Laura. So I don't think we expect mentoring to be more effective without providing training and tools and being more explicit about expectations. Excuse me. For example, by training mentors to use instructional frameworks to support their coaching, it is clear to both mentors and new teachers what improvement looks like across a range of teaching skills. Things like how to organize students for small group, or how to use questioning more intentionally to push students to think more deeply on a topic. So for example, my mentee was amazing, right? And at the same time, I learned from her, so that was really good. But her kids were struggling in a subject area, in a specific standard. So what we did is we kind of let data drive her instruction, and we sat down, we dissected the standard, and we looked for research-based strategies to support their learning. But at the same time, we're supporting the whole learning. We also planned for small group instruction. So we found that working together and collaborating together is an example of how we can, like how I go from a mentee to coaching to supporting her in the needs that her students need. We looked at the data, it was data driven. We targeted their needs in either small group or whole group. And then if that didn't work, come back together. And just like you said, it was always about time. I spent more time, going to her room during my conference time than anything else. But that was the choice that, we both decided to make, because at the end, like I said, it's always about our students and how we want them to grow, because ultimately they're our future. So, yeah.
That's such a great example. I love the way you highlighted how you all worked together around a specific area of instruction that she needed to improve in. But I think what that example really highlights are the skills that you were able to develop as a mentor through some of the training and support to actually be able to have those coaching conversations to help her hone in on, this is the area, that you're struggling in, this is the area that we want to improve, and here's how we're going to create that improvement over time. I think that's just a really great example for us to hear about that, not only the instructional focus, but the coaching skills you developed to help make that conversation and ultimately that instructional improvement happen. So in addition to the time, tools, and resources that we've spoken about, we also have talked about a little bit throughout the conversation today, and it's highlighted in the paper, the importance of that district cohesion, bringing together all of the priorities and the systems and structures to be working together, and having mentoring as a central component of that. So Sean, you all are, Jefferson Parish, it's a large district, as I shared in your introduction. You're one of the largest districts in the nation, the largest in Louisiana. You all have a lot of really important work and priorities that are happening all across your schools. And you have many different types of schools that you serve in Jefferson Parish as well. So what are some of the ways that you as a district team and as a district leader are creating alignment across the multiple areas and initiatives that you have, whether it's, you know, implementation of your high quality curriculum, or your ongoing professional learning structures through leadership teams, or your cluster/professional learning communities? How do you kind of bring everything together so that mentoring works with all of these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's, once again, it's a challenge. But anyways, you know, seriously, I go back to structures again. And so the district has set a structure, and there is oftentimes a bad denotation when the district tends to set that type of precedence. But that precedent, that experience has been co-developed with many times with our principals, groups of teacher leader groups, advisory councils. And so we kind of set that trajectory together. But a couple of things I would say. Our strategic plan is our Bible, or whatever belief you have. And so that strategic plan guides everything we do. I'm very proud to say that teacher leaders, and specifically mentor teachers, are directly mentioned in 4 of the 6 key priorities of the district. And so there's not a conversation that to be had that cannot have a conversation about a mentor teacher or a teacher leader, as it relates to content and curriculum, as it relates to shared leadership, as it relates to hiring and retaining the best for teachers, and recruiting the best teachers. As it relates to upward trajectory, mobility, building a pipeline for success that breeds this mission. But I'll also say that less is more. And so compared to 4 years ago, when we came in and we had a district where everybody had 84 curriculums, every school was doing their own thing, everybody was doing this and that and that. We've streamlined a lot of that to a kind of a one band, one sound approach, and a less is more approach. And so we've been able to really break it down into what really moves student outcomes. And with our partnerships, our tight partnerships with people like NIET and other organizations, we've really focused on those foundations that really move student learning, effective clusters and PD, shared leadership opportunities through mentoring, and content standards work. And so when we're looking at the mentoring program, even, we always look at the design of what our other facets of the district are doing. We always look at it from the key lens of our overall arching goals and our strategic plan. And then we look at what are our principals doing and how are they going to have to support this? How are the master teachers going to have to, and APs going to have to support the work all the way down to the mentor? How are the content leaders, ESL coaches, SPED folks, all the way down to the mentor level to improve student outcomes? And so one thing I really like that we've started to do recently, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due, this credit actually goes to our Chief Academic Officer, Laura Russell, at the time, or at this present time, is we decided to align a lot of our PD. You know, we're going to give high quality structured PD to the entire district, but in a district our size, we cannot support. So the rubber meets the road at the school level. And so we've got to make sure that we are training the folks that are going to be directly responsible for supporting, whether it be the master teacher down to the teacher, or even just the master teacher to the mentor teacher. We've got to make sure that those folks are churning along in the same fashion and have a similar understanding language of what is occurring and what's happening and why it's important. So often we forget the why. But going back to the mentoring side, how does this impact what we do with our mentors? And so I want to go back to it because I kind of like what I think it was Ruth who was saying about what TEA does. And we have a similar fashion, except that this is our first year where the Louisiana Department of Education has actually stepped off of the train. We've kept the requirements. We know what the requirements are, but our district has actually chosen to keep a much higher threshold than the state level threshold at this time. And so our mentors go through very similar training to what our master teachers, APs, and principals do, but from a very different context, from a very coaching, very relationship-based, very reciprocal type of relationship. But we want to see that at all levels. And that's something we definitely pride our program on. And one of those cultural pieces I talked about is this reciprocity of mentee to mentor and mentor to mentee, that we can learn from each other. But one thing I want to highlight that is mentioned in this paper, it's not the core of the paper, is something that has guided our work for this year, to give you a very tangible example. All of our summer PD was based around the teaching learning progression on curriculum. I call it on content curriculum. But I want to tell you something, and this is kudos to NIET. I actually didn't see this in the fashion that the title lays out. I actually saw this as this is how we train new teachers. That's the first thing I saw. And that's the same thing we've done. So what we did first this summer is we took the district, we laid out our foundations, our goals. We are sticking majorly in the two first columns of that matrix, which are content standards, the what, and then basic instruction, the why. Not because now you're probably thinking, okay, cookie cutter here, why is that important? It's obviously scaffolded for different levels of people, whether they're in their veteran year and they're doing fine, whether they're a veteran struggling teacher or they're a new teacher. But I think that's a good example of how everybody's turning along. That same training is also filtering down into our mentoring training. So this year, our mentoring training consists of 9 days. Most years it's 9 days. On the off years, it's usually 4 to 5 for returning folks. And this year, we're focused on that those same two domains. So really keying in on those core things that really shift student outcomes, such as effective planning, deepening content standards, and the actual pedagogy that goes in every day. Utilizing those coaching cycles to really focus on that. Our clusters are also focusing on that, all the way from our school level clusters up to our district level clusters, up to our district department clusters are all keying in on this. And so what you have is truly, in my opinion, for the first time, our district is churning in really one whole direction together. The outcome is yet to be seen. But I'll also note that with our mentors, to go a little deeper, they're getting training in mentoring for content instruction, mentoring for classroom management. They get 2 days dedicated to deepening their content in ELA, 2 days deepening their content in math. We're adding a science track to make sure they're more well-rounded to support more folks and to also expose mentors who may not be exposed to different things to help them grow and to continue to grow. But this, for the first time this year also, they also will receive 3 days of the TAP evaluator training with a very heavy lens that they are not evaluators and they are not even observers unless they're in our 14 transformation schools, which they do a little bit of observing, but using it from the lens of how can a coach take this deep, rich instructional rubric, tie it to content and curriculum and pedagogy, take the best of what we know about relationships and adult learning and mirror that into coaching cycles that really move the trajectory and become reciprocal relationships for growth for the mentee and the mentor, and hopefully improve student outcomes along with improving the cultural aspect and the long-term vitality of the district. And so as you can probably tell, some of you maybe can tell this, I'm a little bit of a long-term thinker. The short-term is not my thing. So long-term is kind of where my game is. And so I don't see anything in mentoring as long-term. And I think that's important as you're trying to tie that to keeping into the structures and things that are happening at the district level and the school level.
Wow, I think so much that we could spend a lot more time unpacking in what you shared there. But what I hope some of our district leaders who are watching are taking away is this idea that mentoring can be not just a tool in the toolbox, but a key tool that we can leverage to really move forward against all of our district and school priorities. And that the other thing I think a big takeaway from what you just shared, Sean, is this idea that we have to train mentors in the systems and in the structures and in the common tools that we're using in other elements of our work at the school or district level, whether that's the rubric, whether that's some of our protocols for coaching or coaching cycles. By investing, training, and mentors around some of those same tools and protocols, we create the alignment and we create the cohesion that puts mentoring support right at the center of our efforts for improvement.
Laura, could I add one last thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
To that? I'm sorry. I did want to add something to what I believe it was Ruth said as well, based on the competency piece. And so back to this part where the seat time is not what matters. We give a lot of time to our mentors. This is at all levels of our teacher leader pipeline, but specifically to our mentoring, our TLFs as we call them, is this idea that they receive ample coaching and support. I mean, it's almost on-demand coaching and support throughout from me. They receive follow-up visits. They receive coaching visits, they receive ability to give feedback in time, but also they are required through our programming to go through a credentialing process for them to even be able to serve as a mentor to an undergrad resident or a post-bac or even a new teacher at this point for our district. And so, back to what Kate said about the compensation, that is important, but we're finding a lot of success in also attaching something where the mentors learn and do, learn and apply, and grow and get feedback until at the end of the year, based on the body of work they've submitted, which is basically like a portfolio, they will get the blessing, we'll say, of the district and their school to apply for their full mentor credential, which also gives them something that a very limited amount of people in our state have. And we're talking less than 1%. And so I think that's a very important factor in building into that structure as well.
Yeah,
sorry, thank you.
No, that was wonderful. I think mentioning that sort of credentialing process, that it's not just sitting and training, but it really is, how are you showing your skills and the competencies that you've learned as a mentor. Unfortunately, we are getting short on time here, so I want to move us to wrapping up. And one of the things that I would love this group to reflect on is just a quick final question for everyone to respond to. We've mentioned a couple times that we know new teachers are facing greater challenges this year than ever, just like all of us in the education community, but potentially, even more severe for our new teachers who are brand new to the profession. So I'd love for you to think about what's one impactful action that you would advise, whether it's a principal, a district leader, a policymaker, anyone in the education stakeholder community. What's one impactful action that they might consider to take right now that would better support our new teachers during this 21-22 school year? Does anyone want to start us off with a quick closing thought on that question? One impactful action we could take.
I'll do something really quickly. Start with developing an internal list of the teachers in the districts who should serve as mentors, based on their contributions to student learning, based on principal evaluations where those two intersect, the same as you should do for student teaching. Make that list and then recruit.
Excellent.
I'll jump in. Many beginning teachers that are just coming into the classroom, as you noted before, have pretty much done all of their student teaching online, up to this point, or maybe even didn't complete student teaching. So there are many things about the kind of the live classroom and what happens, day to day in that classroom, which they may not be adequately exposed to. So just one idea that I had was trying to allocate more time for new teachers to visit and observe classrooms, that principals or the mentor leader knows where that really high quality instruction is going on, and try to provide, some time for that, new teacher, to meet with the teacher in that class afterwards to kind of debrief on some of the moves that they might have made, both around discipline or issues, but also around instruction.
It's a great idea. Ruth or Mari, do you want to jump in? Or Sean?
I think just making it a safe place for our teachers, so they can reflect and so they can monitor and adjust, and building that capacity and that relationship with them. And that for them to understand that we are human, we're going to take it day by day, we're going to adjust and monitor, and there will be mistakes, but if your heart is there and the collaboration is there and the will and the gut is there, I think that the mentor and the mentee will both grow professionally and personally.
Wonderful. Ruth?
I think piggybacking off of that on just a basic level, this idea of listening to the needs of new teachers and mentor teachers. Just speaking on a personal level, when I was in my first year of teaching, I had 5 different coaches / mentors assigned to me, all telling me 5 different things. So I think recognizing that the new teacher has a certain experience or a certain perspective, and then also listening to and leveraging mentor teachers. And I think that's kind of what Sean was speaking towards as well, with like including mentor teachers in the goals and really centering them in the conversation and listening to their feedback is really powerful.
That's excellent. I love this idea that both of you elaborated on elevating that new teacher voice as a part of the support. Sean, a quick last word from you on a.
Yeah, I can actually keep this real quick, so it's good. I'll just be real quick on this one. But look, for the last 2 years, I live in South Louisiana right now. I've been out of school for 2.5 weeks, and some of our kids are going to be out for another month. But I want to say this: during these 2 last years, I've stuck with a very simple principle that I've been able to gain a lot of traction around with my mentors and their mentees is keep the metal to the pedal, but give grace, expect grace, and receive grace. Because remember, and this is for my administrators, for any mentor teachers on this call, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a new teacher. And so don't expect them to be an all-star by December. Expect them to be an all-star at the end of maybe year 2 or year 3. We need to invest in growing them systematically and strategically. And that's something I'm pushing forward. That's something I'm going to push forward in a new initiative that I'll be coming out with, hopefully in 2022. And that's kind of where I want to leave you with that. Just make it realistic, but also still make that the expectation. It's important.
Excellent words of wisdom. This idea of continuous improvement. We have to keep our ultimate vision in sight. We have to keep those expectations high, but we have to know that we are all working on a continuous basis, getting feedback to move forward. It's the same thing we expect for our students. We have to also expect for our new teachers as well, that continuous improvement focus. Well, I want to close out by thanking our panel for a terrific discussion today about maximizing the impact of new teacher mentoring and the strategies that we can all take in order to make that new teacher mentoring more effective. I want to encourage our audience to take a look at our paper just released this morning. It's been put in the chat a couple times. You can also find it on the NIET website. That paper is entitled "Why New Teacher Mentoring Falls Short and How to Fix It." It explores many of the specific strategies and action steps that we talked about today that can lead us towards better outcomes with mentoring. In addition to the paper, we're going to be sharing a series of blogs from some of our educators and our panelists today, as well as others that we interviewed for the paper. That's going to be going on our website over the course of the next week. So please check that out at niet.org. We're also going to continue this conversation on social media. You can find us at NIET Teach on Twitter. So we encourage you to find us there and continue this great conversation that's been happening in the chat around new teacher mentoring. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.